All right. Let's just see how this works. Slowly learning how to do this whole streaming thing. But you know, practice makes perfect, right? So, today I am coding a game. I will say that this game, in the end goal, will have some 18 plus content that can be turned off. Or maybe disabled. Whatever. But in this video, I'm not gonna be discussing any 18 plus stuff, so I didn't rate the video for that. And just to be sure, the heck did I do? I had something here. Alright. Bop. Right. Yes. I watched this thing.
Be flagged by the community. Frustrating when an action is ball. YouTube generally doesn't allow nudity or sexual content, including pornography. But videos that discuss sexuality from an education, documentary, scientific, or artistic perspective may be the exceptions to the rule.
Ta-da! So, yes. I plan to maybe offhandedly mention stuff, but, I don't see any goddamn unreads. Fucking liar. Oh, right. Okay. Anyway. Like I said, I am doing the code architecture. So, the end goal for this project is that I would like to create a game based on the concept of isekai and system novels. If you're not familiar with the concept of isekai, isekai is the trope of transported to another world, right? A person could suddenly become aware that they have the ability to transcend space and time and then move dimensions. They could slip and fall through like a crack in space-time. They could get kidnapped by some kind of fifth dimensional being, or the main character could themselves be a fifth dimensional being. And the idea behind this is I want to create a game where a person, so it's going to be a, like, a game that involves going to different worlds and then either completing tasks in those worlds or just trying to survive in those worlds, depending on the backstory that you picked, right? If you just slipped through time and space and ended up somewhere else, you don't have the ability to move to a new world, and you basically are just sort of stuck there until you die. So get used to it and learn how to live. System novels are for those who are unfamiliar, is a genre of Chinese novels that have to do with what are basically fifth dimensional beings that travel from world to world, frequently with some kind of goal in mind, such as they're involved in upkeeping the cosmic order and the flow of fate energy or luck, among people. And they'll go to one world and then they'll usually alter history in some way, and then they'll go to another world and blah, 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 blah. Right? So a system is an AI program that is fifth dimensional in nature, capable of transporting a human person, or at the very least their soul, and then attaching that soul to the body of somebody in the dimension that you want to go to. And sometimes you also move with your body. It depends on the genre, or not the genre, but it depends on the specific book. So, as I was saying, system novels basically are very similar to isekai, except that you are moving rapid, like it's usually faster paced, and each new world could be between 10 chapters to 200 chapters depending on the length of the novel in question, right? Some of the novels are really long and they go through a bunch of different worlds. Those ones usually have only like 10 chapters, but it's not uncommon for Chinese web novels to have like 5,000 chapters or more, especially if the chapters are pretty short, because sometimes a chapter is only what we would consider a page or two in a traditional printed text, right? And other times chapters could be quite long. It's not super standardized. So anyway, I've been planning out how exactly I'm going to make this game, and I decided that this is my basic code structure, and I'm making this for myself and for anybody who joins the project later to help me with the coding. So we're going to generate dimensional origin, and that's what I mentioned before with the whole, dimensional origin goes along with the whole how the mess did you get into this other world, right? Did you suddenly awaken supernatural powers one day? Did you trip on a rock and then when you got up from the ground realized you were somewhere you weren't supposed to be? Or did you fall off a cliff? Did you get hit by Truck Coon? Are you a wandering ghost who's possessed the still barely breathing corpse of someone who was about to die? How exactly did your soul and or body, because you could have one or both, move to a dimension other than the dimension that you started in, the one that your soul was generated in, right, where you were born. And then after you choose how you move through dimensions, you generate your own personal backstory, which most likely will require you to generate some amount of your original world, right? So it'll generate some information about your original universe. And then generate a backstory from that. Next, we're going to generate your body and your mind. And this is used to generate your skills, basically. And your backstory is going to limit what options you have available. So that's the character creation process, more or less. In some games, if your dimensional backstory is, you're a fifth dimensional being who possesses the bodies of people in other dimensions, then your body is going to get left behind in your original dimension, and your mind and any skills that are associated with your mind are going to go along with you into the body that you have chosen to possess. If you are transported with your body, then your body and mind will both go there, but then you won't necessarily have an already set up life that you're just integrating into. You kind of have to start from scratch. And if your body looks very different than how people look in the world that you're going to, well, that could cause some problems depending on what type of goals you have going there. Anyway, if you are a super powerful person, a part of a fifth dimensional corporation that is really sketchy and plunders other universes for resources, then obviously, maybe you don't care that much about, being able to integrate into the local society. However, if you are trying to not get caught, then yeah, you might want to hide. So it's going to depend. So we have several stages of generation in this game. We're generating a multiverse. Now, it sounds big, but it's really just a couple of numbers, right? I have it set up. Let me load up RenPy really quick here. RenPy. And I'll show you guys the very simple multiverse generator that I am in the middle of making for this game. Alright, so as you can see, there's several different layers going on here. It's in black and white. Eventually, colors can be applied here. But I've got this random thing, and what it's doing is, according to the numbers I gave it, it's randomly determining how many of these planes are generating. So what I have is artificial planes up here, and this is also an artificial plane. And then down here is spiritual planes, this is celestial plane, which is a type of divine plane. This is chthonic plane, that's like the underworld, it's another type of divine plane. And then these two right here are the spirit worlds. This one has more energy, and this one has less energy. And this in the middle is the terrestrial plane. So in this game, it's loosely based on, scientific principles to some degree to give it realism, but at its core it is a fiction, right? So in this fictional universe, multiverse, whatever, terrestrial planes are the planes responsible for generating new energy for the universe, right? In real life, that's not necessarily how it works because of entropy, but for the sake of the game, that's how it works. And this will be mid-order planes, and it generates all the energy for every other plane in its connected network of universes, right? So spiritual planes have to receive energy from the terrestrial plane, and the celestial planes house gods, and then gods poach energy from the terrestrial plane using faith, right? They start a cult, and then they start a religion, and when people from the terrestrial plane have faith in their gods, right, then that faith is powering this dimension up here. And then the chthonic dimension is it's lower order in the sense that it is less successful at surviving, right? So the higher order a plane is, the more energy it is capable of, it's had for a longer period of time, right? The more stable it's been, the more successful a dimensional predator it is, basically, right? And then the ones at the bottom have not been very successful because they're running out of energy, and if they don't get energy soon, they're probably going to be destroyed. So that is generally how it works. Now, the reason I decided to do this is that I want to give the players control over how safe and how dangerous the worlds that they are going to enter is. Like, if somebody wants to play the game and they just want a lighthearted game, and maybe they want to play, with lots of cute stuff happening, then they will make lots of terrestrial planes so that there is a very energy-rich resource pattern in this multiverse. If there's a bunch of different terrestrial planes, then the celestial plane and the chthonic plane and the artificial planes on either end, all of those are not, they're not very competitive towards each other, right? And because they're not very competitive towards each other, people live in relative peace. Now, in a world where there's very few terrestrial planes and way more of the other two types, either, the higher order or the lower order dimensions, well, those worlds are going to be more dangerous because there is fewer resources to go around, and so everyone is fighting for them. So that is why I decided to generate something as vague as a multiverse, right? So then the bioverse, that's literally just planets, but I want to give the opportunity to generate some universes that don't follow the laws of physics. For example, World of Darkness is a tabletop game that is based on the modern world, but with more fantasy and horror elements. It has planets and whatnot, but it's not important. That's just part of the lore. Now, the company that created this game also has a paired game called Exalted. Now, Exalted is considered lore-wise to be the precursor world to the World of Darkness world. And it does not have planets and the sun and space. Instead, it is just a plane of existence surrounded by primordial chaos, right? So I want to be able to generate either of these two options. Younger universes will have primordial chaos, and they won't have planets and stars and all that kind of stuff, necessarily. And then, there'll be more science-based, physics-based stuff as well. So that's going to be generated in the bioverse or the universe level, right? And then it also means, is this a celestial plane? Is this a terrestrial plane that you're living in? Is this a chthonic plane? Have you entered the underworld? That kind of stuff. So Biosphere is a planet, or in the case of a, primordial chaos type dimension, then a biosphere is going to be more of, any pocket that's surrounded by primordial chaos, basically, right? If we're talking about Exalted, then all of creation would pretty much be one biosphere. But, on the other hand, if there were multiple countries that were surrounded by primordial chaos, then maybe each individual country would be its own biosphere for the purposes of this generator. A biome is going to be, so biome, that's an ecological term. It basically, the major biomes, there's aquatic biomes and then there's terrestrial biomes. So, let's see if I can get some graphics for you guys. So, we're going to be talking about the major biomes. 5 major biomes. Alright, so, National Geographic's good shit. Alright, so, this isn't very graphic. How rude. Fine, we'll just look for an infographic. Whatever, I'll just read it. Aquatic, grassland, forest, desert, and tundra, right? So, aquatic biomes are gonna be, it would be nice if I could find, some nice picture for you guys one day. But, I'll probably move on in the conversation before I find anything that looks nice. So that's life. Alright, so those are the major biome types, right? So the program is going to generate those major biomes, and once in the biome, it's going to generate a habitat, and a habitat is kind of a more specific type of biome. And then it's going to generate the ecosystem, and the ecosystem is when we start to generate actual living creatures. So I plan to, for example, generate what type of soil comes in what types of biomes, right? And then that determines what types of plants will live there and what types of animals can live there, and also what types of, like, adaptations that they're going to need to live. Because instead of deciding to generate animals by groupings, like generate random wild dogs, generate turtles, right? That's based on Earth. I want to open up the ability to, in the future, generate more alien creatures that seem vaguely Earth-like. Think if you've seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, how they have, like, penguin seals and all those weird little creatures. I'm thinking of basically something like that, you know? Or like the weird animals that appear in the anime Utaware Rumono. Like things that look vaguely what we would be familiar with. I definitely want to keep the designation of insects, fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. And then I'm going to store humanoids as a very special type of mammal, because that's the type that you will be playing as. So, in any case, a community is a smaller system. It's basically all the things that you can think of. A community as like a neighborhood. And then the population would be like a household. And then individuals are, of course, individuals. So, this is a little bit off because I don't actually plan for the game to generate all the individuals in a universe every time you load a game. That would be a bit ridiculous. So instead, I need to get enough information to determine where the player is located and how to generate the environment. So I need a habitat, right? That's what I need. And then the ecosystem is used to create a random encounter table. And the random encounter table is created newly for each area, right? Based on whatever qualifications. So then I start working on the gameplay. Well, whatever. So for the gameplay, I have generate, and I'm figuring out what types of screens I need to make and what types of overlays I need for those screens, and then what types of skills I'm going to need in order to make the gameplay that I'm envisioning in my mind, right? So I have generate just as a reminder that, yes, this other stuff is all there. And I decided that the primary gameplay is going to take place in the environment screen. So that's going to be a screen where you see the area immediately in front of you, right? It'll be like a background picture. Let's pick... In my art, I've got some examples of what this might look like. So let's go and find some background art that I did for this game at some point. Is it under maps? No, it's not under maps. Where did I put that? Did I not put it in folders, or... Maybe I put it under GUI? Yes, I did put it under GUI. Nice. Okay. So, background images would be like this, right? Except obviously I would need to get the perspective right so it actually looks like you could be standing upright while looking at the environment. But, anyway, this is generally what the environment screen will look like, right? And then most of the gameplay will take place in the environment screen. So then I decided for survival, because when I was planning out this game, I have really big dreams for it. I want you to be able to go far into the past, into a Beastman world with shapeshifters and, a tribal society and magic. And I want you to be able to go into a, medieval fantasy setting, with Renaissance level technology and swords and magic or whatever, or medieval level technology, whatever. Or maybe a modern setting with no magic, or maybe a futuristic setting with like space opera vibes and spaceships and fighting the Zerg, right? And this sounds really ambitious, but you have to understand it's going to be mostly just pictures and text, right? So I'm not generating a lot of 3D stuff, and I plan to make the building blocks simpler so that it doesn't take as much stuff. Anyway, so I decided that I'm gonna start with a kind of beastkin world with shapeshifters because I want to start really low tech. And for each additional tech level I add, that's basically going to be another major feature I add. So in the beginning, you and the people that you're interacting with have no common language, right? You cannot interact using language. You can interact using grunts and like tone of voice and body language, but as for common language, nothing, You're still gonna maybe get some language from the GUI and in the form of narration, but any people that you interact with, you have no idea what they're saying, and you just have to do your best. And then, later I'll program in dialogue, and then I'll fix that. So I decided that if you are in this type of shapeshifter world, where there's animal people who like transform into animals and then transform into part animal, part people. That's the type of world that I'm going to start in, and it's going to have like tribal society, maybe closer to cavemen in the beginning, but then as I figure out the crafting system, I'll, age the society up. And then you'll have more options. So you can always go less technology, but I'll gradually be adding more technology options. So in this type of world, I decided that we need to figure out what is going to be the most important thing for you to survive. Well, the most important thing is not to get eaten, right? So the predator-prey overlay is going to be the first one that I make, right? So as the prey, because I think I'll probably generate only plants and herbivores to start with, and then adding carnivores will probably be a big update later. So as prey, you need to be able to hide your traces or your tracks so that other people can't find you. You need to be able to detect when you're going to be ambushed. You need to be able to defend yourself against a predator. You need to escape being slaughtered. And obviously, once we've got to the butcher level, if you're a prey, you're dead at that point, so you don't have any options for that. So that is one thing. Now, if you are interacting as a predator, which will be used for making food, I'll add that once I add predators later. For now, I'm just going to be adding producers, which is like plants and algae, And then I'm going to be adding primary consumers, which is the ecological term for things that are like herbivores, right? So then we have the material overlay, which is you're surveying your environment for any material that is useful to you, right? You're determining what's of use and what is not of use. Then you have the ability to gather this material. You can process the material into something else. For example, if you take grass, maybe you'll dry that grass out and then you will twist it into rope. That would be processing. Assembling would be if you cut a rock into a specific shape and then put two of those things together, right? And then installing would be if you built, some type of small machine, then you install it at a permanent location at your base camp, right? So those are all going to need their own screens eventually, and some of them might not be accessible in the beginning of the game. For example, installation, I don't know what that would even look like for people who live in caves or burrows, right? I don't know. We'll figure that out later. Anyway, so the last major part of gameplay is going to be the communication overlay. So communication is going, without any, ability to speak, is going to involve surveying the other person's intentions. Is this a person that is a predator? Are they a prey? Or are they somebody who is a member of my community, right? Are they somebody that is useful to me? Trade involves not only trading material goods, but also trading emotions and trading information. And then reproduce is obviously reproduce. And that can be a form of communication for like non-reproductive purposes, or it can be literally to make the next generation. I think it would be pretty cool to allow the player to have their own children at some point. But we'll see how I go with the programming, right? So this is the next layer of complexity with the code. So then I moved on and I was like, all right, let's really concentrate on this predator-prey overlay, right? So I changed track to traces because tracks are a type of trace, right? It's like footprints, but a trace is more broad, right? So I'm going to use the word traces because I can't believe I put ambussy. That sounds like a really weird gay slang. Anyway, typos are fun. So hide traces is a skill, and there's also going to be kind of a button activated overlay. So how I'm imagining this happening is most of the prey skills for when you're being, in the predation overlay, a lot of the prey skills are going to be more or less passive, but you have to activate them, right? So let's say you're near your home base, you haven't left very far, maybe you don't hide your traces because doing so requires more energy and you want to save your energy for something else. But let's say you decide you're going to go and travel somewhere far away to a resource point, like a water hole, and you know that at water holes, lots of predator and prey show up around there, and maybe if you go there and you're not hiding your traces, a predator is going to follow you back to your home. That would suck. So then it might be more worth it for you to turn on this skill. So if you have the ability to hide your traces, it will appear as a button overlay that will just show up in your screen, right? So maybe here you would have some like thing telling you what your current condition is, like how much energy you have, for example, is going to be the big one. and then maybe whether you have any injuries. That'll be a secondary thing. And then maybe you'll have a button show up over here that is like hide traces. And you click that button, and then it turns on that skill, and bam, you're doing that. But maybe at a higher skill level, you just automatically hide your trace everywhere you go. In which case, you basically are like a ninja, right? You're just very sneaky as a person. But in the beginning, when you're not very good, you have to activate it purposefully. So, detect ambush, or as this says, ambussy, that is basically your ability to be alerted when when somebody is stalking you. And I wrote here a button activated overlay, but now that I think about it, I think this is going to be more of like a pop-up that just appears on your screen that'll just tell you you feel eyes on you. Something like that. And the better you are, the more detailed the pop-up will be. So at the beginning, it'll just say you feel like you're being watched. But you won't see anything and you won't hear anything. But then maybe, and that's if, this skill also is going to be affected by attributes, right? So if your eyesight is the highest of all of the skills that feed into the detect ambush skill, then maybe your traits, like the little pop-up, is going to give you more visual information instead of auditory information, right? So it'll pop up and it'll say, you see something flash by in the distance. You hear a snapping of a branch. That kind of stuff. So, defend against predators as a skill. This is going to be the things that you have that defend you against predators that are not directly combat related. They're not related to overpowering. They're related to making this thing go away from you. So, for example, a skunk spraying the enemy. That would be considered defense. Or a rhinoceros having really tough skin. That would also be considered defense. So last we have escape from slaughter. So the escape from slaughter skill is also going to be different depending on your skill set. So sometimes this might mean, for example, being able to distract the other person and roll away. Because once you're at this level, you've already failed your grapple, right? So what happens is you go through stalking, you go through combat, you go through grapple, and then the other person is going to try to kill you if that was their goal, right? Maybe their goal was just to kidnap you, but if their goal was to kill you, this would be the time they would try to do that. And so you have one last chance to save yourself. Now, let's say this character is really socially oriented. Maybe they would try to communicate instead, like say, hey, I know where this resource is, and I can lead you there if you don't kill me. Early game, when you don't have language, obviously you won't be able to do that. But, there are going to be other ways that you might be able to get out of this situation. So then we have the predator version, right? So let's say later in the game, I'm going to add the existence of predators. And predators are going to be... predators are going to randomly show up according to their population. I'm going to generate predators based on the ecological system. So you are going to have an ecological rank. For example, a primary consumer is a herbivore. Or you could be a secondary consumer, which is a predator that preys on herbivores. Or you could be a tertiary consumer, which is a predator that preys on secondary consumers, right? So, to give you an example, let's say a cow is a primary consumer, right? And maybe something that eats cows Let's go something easier. Let's say a rabbit. A rabbit is a primary consumer because it is eating grass, right? So now let's assume that there is a fox, and the fox will eat the rabbit. But maybe there's also wolves that eat the fox, or an eagle that also eats foxes and fox-sized creatures, right? And the eagle might also eat the rabbit, but because the eagle is capable of preying on some things that eat rabbits, that puts it into a higher tier on the things that will eat you list. So there's also quaternary predators, but not all areas have those. I think bears are an example of quaternary predators in many ecosystems. But again, it's not a species thing, right? So let's say a fox in one biome could be a secondary consumer, but then maybe they move to another biome and suddenly they're a tertiary or a quaternary consumer, right? So it's a relationship that's not stable. It's based on its specific place in the food chain in the area that it's in, right? Anyway, so if the player is a predator, then you are going to survey traces. And that's going to be looking for evidence that prey animals have been in the area, right? And if you find traces, well, then it is time to stalk the prey. So ambush mechanics involve stalking, and then there's going to be a button to initiate the ambush. Now, stalking is, of course, being sneaky and trying to track down and then eat the prey. And the ambush exists to make sure that when you initiate combat, combat is in your favor, right? So combat is in your favor, and therefore combat's in your favor, and therefore you are able to have a better chance of success, right? So then there's the overpower prey, and this is when you're going to like fight it out until one of you can't fight anymore, right? Grapple happens after that, right? So you have to get in close quarters, but sometimes you'll be able to kill things without getting to close quarters if you have like ranged weapons, but again, we're starting very low tech first. And then there's slaughter, right? You slaughter your prey, and I dropped this off because I don't think it super fits in here. It might be more about materials, but butchering would then happen, but butchering might be more in the material screen. So then I would, look at this and say, okay, how can I make this even more detailed so I can get even more information about what types of skills I need, right? Because so far I know that I'm going to have the hide traces skill, the detect ambussy skill, the defend against predators skill, the escape from slaughter skill, right? And I probably are going to change these names later, but, for simplicity's sake here. So then I went here and I was like, I really should have made this multiple images, but we'll zoom in here for you guys. So we generate the environment skin and then predation overlay. So then we have the tracking overlay, and that's going to have the same background as the environment. So this background is not going to change. It's going to look the same, but other stuff, like the buttons you see on screen, will change. And then traces will be highlighted if you have a very high skill. If you have a lower skill, then maybe they're only going to highlight after your mouse or whatever, if you're on mobile, after you touch that area, like with your finger. And then after that, at a lower level of skill, the traces are not animated, and so you basically just have to tap around the screen, and then, or click around the screen, and see if anything interacts. I'm probably going to make that very low, and you'll quickly be able to get better at it, because that's always really annoying. And then traces not identified nor discoverable is when you basically don't have enough skill level. And so I think this isn't only based on skill level, but it's also like a competing check, right? So it's how much better they are at hiding versus how good you are at tracking. So if they are a lot better than you, maybe you only have this option. You can only encounter them pretty much by accident because they're just better than you. If they're way better than you, you're not going to encounter them at all, and therefore they're not going to get generated unless they're ambushing you, right? On the other hand, if you're way better than them, they're going to show up in a big glaring highlight because it's obvious to you at your skill level. So then we get the stalking overlay. This is when you've already identified your prey, because this whole section is identify your prey, right? So once you've identified the prey, the background hasn't changed yet, which is good because it saves on art assets. And then there's going to be hiding spots, right? So that's going to be things like trees and rocks that are big enough to hide whatever type of creature this is. And again, it follows the same sort of pattern. So the difference is, imagine you're hunting something that has the ability to camouflage, right? Like a lizard or an octopus. It can transform the color of its body to match its environment. So maybe it's showing up on the screen, but you can't see it, right? So then you might do this and just click around and find it by accident. But, maybe camouflage is more in the tracking rather than the stalking. Unless you were following a creature and then it only tried camouflage later, whatever. So then we have the hunting screen, which I'm not sure whether that really needs to be different than the stalking screen. Yeah, because tracing means that the prey is not on the same area as you yet. So you're trying to locate the prey. And then the stalking is when you are in the same area as the prey and you're not close enough to attack yet. And then hunting is when you are close enough to attack and you are going to attack. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then combat is when you are engaged in active combat. And then grapple is even a closer form of combat, like wrestling. And then, of course, there is the slaughter screen. So I decided that the way this is going to work visually is the combat screen is going to have the same background image. It's just that the creatures will appear as if they're closer to you, right? And then the grapple screen is going to have its own different backgrounds because it's going to be closer to you. Or maybe it'll be on the ground or against a wall or something, right? Like maybe a predator pins its prey against a tree or, pins it to the ground. Or maybe it wraps around, like a snake wraps around a person while they're standing upright, So it could have, there's a possibility of a different background image depending on how things go. So then we have the slaughter screen. And in the grapple screen, so I decided that in combat, instead of the important thing that you need to know is openings, right? So openings are going to be places you think you can attack that they can't defend, right? So you're seeing that this person is not very fast at reflexes, so you could hit anywhere on their body that you can reach, right? So openings is just anywhere that you can reach, right? That's all it means. Anywhere on their body that you can reach. The grapple screen switches to joints. And of course, it does require you to have the skills to see joints, right? But at this level, joints are going to be most useful because you're actually in range to get that level of detail, right? So joints are useful because you can incapacitate things by taking out their joints, but you're not easily able to go for vitals without a high level of skill, right? If you have a very high combat skill, you might be able to go for vitals all the way in the combat screen or even in the hunting screen if you have a ranged weapon. But for somebody of low skill, the joints only open up in the grapple screen. So this will let you give penalties to the prey that you're trying to overtake. So then we have the slaughter screen. And the slaughter screen, it opens up the vitals, right? Because somebody who's never killed a prey before is not going to be able to reasonably kill the prey very well by accurately puncturing its vitals unless that thing is incapacitated, which is why it comes after grappling. So once you have a prey in your possession and it's, I don't know, tied up or too tired to move, or maybe it got stuck in quicksand or a pit trap, whatever, then you could see the vitals screen and then you would click on the vital to, I don't know, slice its throat open or something. So, yeah, this is just an overview of the code architecture of the game so far. Obviously, there is more to be fleshed out, and when I do, I will make another video for you all. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I will post again in the future when I have more work done. Thank you for watching.